Fiona Rae is one of the infamous generation known as YBAs, or Young British Artists. However, unlike her peers, such as Damien Hirst and Tracey Emin, who explored installation and film, Fiona has stayed faithful to painting. Characterised by a painstaking technique, intensity of colour and armoury of images, there is nothing predictable about her vision. Now she's going to show her most recent work at the Frieze Art Fair in London, and in May 2012 she will have a retrospective at the Leeds Art Gallery. I'm here in her studio to talk to Fiona about her work.
I think the paintings that Tim Taylor Gallery are taking to Frieze are quite a specific group. They're quite dark. There's black drawing in them, but then the black drawing has started to dissolve into drips and things. And then there's quite colourful, filled in bits of colour, almost like a child's colouring book technique. But again, it's a bit disintegrated. I think they're kind of a specific group. They're a bit moody.
Is this a move towards a slightly darker vision for you? Or?
Oh, I go in and out of darker visions. One or two of the paintings in the studio at the moment are much more pop and kind of upbeat in mood, like the one over there, which is called A Naughtiness Discretionary Party, which I think is something.
A Naughtiness Discretionary Party?
Yeah. Where did
that come from?
I got it off a t-shirt or something.
You have a really strong and particular sense of colour. Can you tell us something about how colour works for you?
I think that I've got quite an unusual colour sense, and it might be to do with having been born in Hong Kong, lived in Indonesia before coming to England. I don't have that particularly English sensibility of muted, natural colours, as you can see. One thing I do try and do is, although the colours might be quite outlandish and out there, is I try and keep them under control in a sense so that they are in dialogue with each other rather than clashing. And this painting here is at a very early stage, and in fact it now needs kind of tamping down almost, I think. And one of the ways that I often approach a painting is to have something worked out in Photoshop, and I'll print it out and I'll use that almost as a colour map, just so that I've got an idea of what I'm going to do with the colours. And in fact, these things here which I've printed out got a set of colours that I like the look of, and I might use that as a start of a painting. But with the way I work, because I improvise and make it up as I go along, sometimes the map just has to get chucked out the car window.
So here's a painting in progress. Why don't you tell us a little bit about where you find your imagery? Where do your pandas come from, for example?
I find my imagery from all over the place, actually. These particular pandas came from a Chinese import shop in New York, down by Canal Street. Whenever I go to different cities, I tend to come back with carrier bags of things that I found. And I think there's something a little bit peculiar about the look of these little embroidered pandas. A little bit challenging, a little bit threatening, but at the same time very appealing in their colour and the liveliness of the graphic stitching on them.
And what draws you to these very pop images?
I think I like the idea of mixing up high and low, different kinds of languages, different things that might not be expected to carry high emotion or superior feeling in some way, I think can do that. And when you put them next to a more expressive brush mark, I think an interesting dialogue can start to take place. Something a bit unusual, a little bit not what you're supposed to do, I think appeals to me. These are all my oil paints. I like everything laid out so I can see all the different colours that I've got. And then on the palette, I mix it with a bit of medium and a bit of oil to make it either wetter or stiffer, according to what kind of brush mark I want to make. And I have all my brushes laid out, and I can choose any different kind of brush for any different kind of job.
You've got a fantastic array of brushes here. What do you use them all for?
Lots of different kinds of things. This is for more a sort of varnishy, smooth mark. A brush like this, I often will load it up with paint, slightly stiff paint, a bit like ice cream, and then hold it in a certain way and get a really amazing multicoloured effect from that. I always use brushes not according to the instructions. So I think if you're a painter and decorator, for example, you only ever get paint on the tip, whereas I'll make it all the way through and have it dripping down, and so they do tend to get a bit ruined after a while.
You were very much considered one of the YBAs. Did you ever find that label quite restrictive or frustrating?
No. It just seemed a very generous, all-inclusive label, actually. There's so many different kinds of artists within that label. It wasn't a movement, there wasn't a manifesto. It was a group of people who'd all been to arts college recently, some of us at the same art school, and carried on being in touch and supportive.
In 2002, you were elected a member of the Royal Academy. How did you feel about that?
Actually, I was rather excited by it. I liked the idea of, I was the youngest at the time, and I liked the idea of that very venerable institution renewing itself with my generation.
So when so many of your peers were turning to new media like installation and film, why did you stay faithful to painting?
I think that painting is such a difficult thing to do that it endlessly intrigues me and keeps me interested. And I think that although, of course, the ways you can make art have expanded exponentially in all kinds of different directions, that there is still a place for painting. It's a very particular experience looking at a painting. It's a physical object. It took time to make, which you can see in the way the marks interrelate on the canvas. And you can just glance at it in a millisecond and have some kind of experience, or you can sit down and look at it for some minutes or even longer and have another kind of experience. It is this real thing that someone has made. It's a person-on-person experience through the medium of canvas and paint.